Hello everybody, this is General Yannis, and today in GeneralJannis Tactics we will be continuing looking through the Thousand Sons, and in this episode, in this video, I'm looking at the Witchfire psychic powers from the Thousand Sons, and is there anything, for example, Death Guard could do to protect themselves, and what are some of the best spells, and what damage output could be expected from Thousand Suns flaming and psyching the enemy armies. So let's get started. So today is the 4th of September, 5th of September, sorry. So today, as I said, psychic powers overview for the Thousand Suns, focusing on the Witchfires, basically the aggressive spells that are doing mortal wounds to the enemy. So first, I'm going to talk about the psychic overview for the Thousand Suns, looking at some psychic test basics and math. What are the chances of denying and successfully casting a certain spell? And then looking at the Thousand Sons Witchfires, their damage output, and looking finally any Death Guard counters to this psychic bonanza that Thousand Sons can put up. Before I start, a very big thanks to my patrons. Let's start with the overview. So the Thousand Sons, of course, are very strong in the psychic phase, and basically that's one of the hallmarks of the Thousand Sons army. You basically have an army of sorcerers accompanied by automata, rubrics, etc., and you have some Jinjian stuff following them, but it's basically an army of sorcerers, so they are really strong in the psychic phase. The army, the codex, has multiple Psyker units. All the HQs, of course, have psychic abilities. The Infernal Master has something similar to that, but here I'm focusing on the psychic powers. In the troops, the Rubric Marines also are a Psyker, and in the elite slot we have the Scarab Terminators also being a Psyker, and the Changor's Shaman is also a Psyker. So you have whatever detachment you're building, you will be having basically quite a lot of Psykers in your army. The detachment ability for the Thousand Sons, the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, adds +1 to their psychic test, so all the Psykers in the Thousand Sun Codex get +1 to their psychic tests, already there, making it more difficult for an enemy to try to deny. On top of this, the Thousand Sons, they have access to a lot of spells. So in the Discipline of Change, there are 9 spells. In the Discipline of Vengeance, there are 9 more spells. And then on top of that, there are 9 cults, each with their unique psychic power. And if you select a certain cult for your detachment, then all the Psykers from that cult know this spell on top of the other ones they know. And then if all the army is Thousand Suns, you can use Kabbalistic rituals, and this increases the potency of the psychic phase. You can make, let's say, auto-passing, non-deniable psychic powers. You can add +1 more or +2, or yeah, you can do a lot of, extend the range of your spells, and etc. So this is a lot of a quite powerful thing on top of the basics, with a lot of spells, a lot of Psykers, and the innate ability to have +1 to all the psychic tests. So looking then at the Thousand Sons Psykers, just a brief overview here. In the HQ choices, we have Ahriman, the named character. He can cast 3 spells, deny 3 spells, and he knows 3 spells. On top of the +1 he gets for just being a Thousand Sons, he can also reroll psychic tests, making him more potent than the rest of the normal Psykers, let's say, in the Thousand Sons. Then we have the Exalter Sorcerer. He can cast 2, deny 1 and knows 2. The Sorcerer has the same. Demon Prince also the same. And then the Rubrics and the Scarab Terminators, they can cast 1 spell, deny 1, and they know 1 spell. Of course, all of them know Smite. And all of them here, when it says they know a couple of spells, they can freely select, add and choose what they want from the 2 disciplines available to them. And as I said, on top, they know the cult's psychic power on top of these mentioned here. The Changor Shaman, he can also cast 1 spell and deny 1. He knows 1 spell. He can only take Discipline of Change only. There is a relic where he can get also 1 more spell and no more spells, also from the Discipline of Vengeance. And then, of course, the Lord of War, Magnus the Red, he can cast 3, deny 3. He knows basically all the spells with the trait he has, all the 18 spells from the Change and the Vengeance disciplines, but he doesn't know the Cult spells, which is a bit strange that the Great Primarch, I guess he should know all of them anyway. But okay, he knows 18 spells. It's not bad, I guess. He has, if he's not wounded, if he's in the first bracket, he has +2 to his spell cast, or he can get +1 to his cast spell, and he can never suffer perils of the warp. So in this, in baseline, he will be having, with a fresh Magnus unwounded, he will be having +3 to his cast rolls. So he can really, yeah, he can really make a lot of damage output with his psychic abilities. So as I said, all have a +1 to cast from the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, the Thousand Sons detachment ability. These guys here, they know also the cult spell they are in. Yeah, let's now look at some of the math behind psychic tests. So looking at psychic tests and denying some of the basics. So here I'm looking at if there is a spell with a warp charge value from 5 to 9, that's typically what is needed. If there are no modifiers to the psychic tests, if there is no deny, there is, for example, 83% chance to manifest the power with a 5+. If the opponent can deny and attempts to deny, on average it will be for 54% success on a 5+ spell, including the chance of failure from the first test before the denial is the deny the witch is attempted. So here we see that for spells like Death Guard Warp Charge 6 with no modifier, we have 70% chance to make it, but 50% chance only if there is a guy denying on top of that. Of course, the higher the warp charge value, the more, the less chance there is that it succeeds with a 2d6 roll here with no modifiers. And but then if we are successful attempting, let's say, manifesting 9+, then it's also more difficult to deny. So the drop by the success rate from a denial becomes less important the higher the warp charge value has been succeeded, of course. The Thousand Sons, as I said, they have +1 to their psychic tests, and that basically is everybody in the codex. So here they are getting a much better success rate compared to the no modifier. So, for example, they have 92% chance to manifest a power of 5, 70% chance to manifest a power of 7+ instead of 58%. The denies also become more difficult. So even if the opponent attempts to deny, there is a 60% chance, 58% chance that the warp charge 7 goes through anyway, even if the opponent tries to deny. If we are looking at Ahriman, he has the +1 to cast that he gets generically, but he can also reroll failed. Here I attempted, he can reroll the psychic test, so he could also potentially reroll to get a bit more difficult to deny. Here in my simulation here, I just accounted for him rerolling only if he fails the warp charge. So basically with a reroll, with a +1, it's almost 100% sure that you would make the 5 warp charge 5 value here psychic power, and the denies get more difficult as he's re-rolling the failed ones, and he with a +1 to cast. If we move up to +2 to cast, there is much better let's say chances to attempt the things, and the deny becomes more and more difficult to pull through. You can see it's almost the same figures here without deny and with deny, and Magnus can even come up to +3 to cast, or Kabbalistic rituals can get others to get +3. So here basically very little chance to deny and very high chance to manifest psychic powers. Even a warp 7, a 9, you have a 72% chance to do it when you have a +3 to the modifier. Now looking into the psychic spells, what Witchfires are available. Of course, on top of Smite, We have in the discipline of change, we have the Tzeentch Firestorm, a warp 6, and the visible enemy unit within 18 inches. You roll 9 dice, and every 6 of those 9 gives a mortal wound. If this is cast on a warp with 9+, then 5 pluses give mortal wounds. So this is strong if you can pair it, especially with +2 or like Magnus or something like this, because you really would like to have this going off on a warp of 9 or plus. Then yeah, you will be doing quite a lot of mortal wounds. So 9 dice, a third of them. So you would be doing mortal wounds here. The Doombolt is also a strong spell, a warp 6. The closest visible enemy within 18 inches gets 3 mortal wounds. So basically, this is a bit stronger smite, but you don't get the chance to do the excess damage, the d6 damage, if you roll 11 plus. The Baleful Devolution is a warp 8, the visible enemy within 18 inches, and you need to select a unit that has 6 or more models in it. So here you roll the number of the dice as the result of your psychic test. So if you roll the 10 and you have a +2, you will be rolling 12 dice. This is how I understand it. 12 dice, and on a roll of 6, for every 6 you have there, the enemy suffers d3 mortal wounds. So you could potentially do a lot of d3 mortal wounds with this one. It's difficult to cast with a warp 8, so you would need, let's say, to add a couple of modifiers to be sure on this one, but this has a high damage potential here. Looking at the Discipline of Vengeance, we have the Gaze of Hate. It's only warp 5. The visible enemy within 18 inches, you roll 3 dice for them, and each 4+ gives 1 mortal wound. So here you would be doing 1.5 mortal wounds on average. So, and it's quite easy for the Thousand Sons to make this pass. In the Dark Blessing, you have a warp 6 value, and you take 1 visible enemy model within 6 inches. So this is as a short range, let's say. If the result is higher than the toughness of that model, the whole unit of that model suffers d3 plus 3 mortal wounds. So this is probably good if your Psyker is attacked, or there are some big infantry, let's say, units close to him, and then you can deal with low toughness preferably, so you can make it. So you would get d3 plus 3 mortal wounds. You roll 1d6 to see if the result is higher than the toughness. In the Psychic stock, it's a warp 5, a visible enemy within 18 inches, and it cannot be a vehicle, monster, or character model. You roll 2d6, and if this is higher than the leadership of the unit, 1 model is slain. This could be quite strong versus, let's say, some bikers with a lot of wounds. If you can kill a multi-wound model with this, but you need to roll 2d6 above the leadership. If the opponent has a high leadership, and I will show you the math afterwards, there is not super high chance to do something, but it could be situational against an enemy that has some elite type multi-wound infantry with not super much leadership. Could be helpful. In the Cult of Magic, there are actually not so many Witchfires in the different cults. Only the Cult of Magic has a Witchfire. The others are being blessings or maledictions. Here we have the Astral Blast for warp 6. The closest visible enemy within 12 inch suffers d3 mortal wounds, and then each other unit within 3 inch of that unit suffers 1 mortal wound additionally. So this is quite good if there is a cluster. You have to be quite close with the 12 inches, but if there is like a blob of infantry and supporting characters and supporting other units around, you could make a splashing mortal wounds with Astral Blast if you are in the Cult of Magic. So looking at this baseline Witchfire, so the damage output, here I don't add any modifiers, and there is no deny here, there is no plus to the psychic test. Here we can see the average mortal wounds expected. Here we see if we use a smite, we'll be getting around 1.7, 1.8 mortal wounds. Every time we cast the smite, we will be adding from the warp 5 that is required. So we have warp 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The more we attempt, the less the less often we will be dealing mortal wounds. So of course its efficacy is dropping as we are throwing it. And here we see the Thousand Sons Witchfires. Here we have the Doombolt is stronger than the Smite with no modifiers. The Firestorm is quite good compared to, let's say, a second Smite. We have the Baleful Devolution here. We have the Gaze of Hate. Those are quite similar, but not better than the first or second Smite. So those become more applicable, let's say, because you can't. After you cast Smite a couple of times, then it's better to start throwing some of the other Witchfires to do more mortal wounds here. The Dark Blessing works quite well against Toughness 3 models, but not so much Toughness 4 or Toughness 5. And the Thousand Sons don't have this contagion to decrease, let's say, automatically the toughness of close by enemy models. The Psychic Stock, here I'm assuming it will be killing a wound 3 model with a leadership 7, but it's still not so high. It probably is quite situational with the Psychic Stock here, and it's not a big chance to, let's say, slay a model in a leadership 9 or leadership 10 unit. The Astral Blast is quite strong. If there is only one unit and no splash damage around, it's quite close to the Firestorm or the Baleful Devolution here, not as good as a Smite. And then if there are multiple units close by, the splash damage will add up. And if there is a cluster, the Astral Blast is really good. Here for reference are the Witchfires from the Death Card Codex. So we have Curse of the Leper, fighting a Toughness 3 enemy within contagion range, Toughness 4, Toughness 5. So this is quite strong here. That's a very strong combo for Death Card. And then the Plague Wind, if it's a small unit, not very efficient. If it's a 20 model unit, you are getting a better performance here. So not so bad. There's some good Witchfires also in the Death Card army. But of course, as we said, the Witchfires for the Thousand Sons, they have +1 to cast, basically all the Psykers. So here, from comparing to the previous page with no modifiers, then we are getting more mortal wounds because now we are making with a +1 the spells are more successful, and we are also in some of them we are reaching more easier, let's say the 9+ to do better damage with the Firestorm, or the +11 to reach the special to do d6 damage with the Smite. So Doombolt, as I said, is the most damaging spell, better than the Smite. The Firestorm, the Baleful Devolution are better than the third Smite. Astral Blast, of course, especially good versus enemy clusters, and the Dark Blessing, if you are facing a low toughness opponent at close by, those are the best spells. Let's say Gaze of Hate, not as good as some of the others here. And if we're assuming a Psychic phase and we're assuming a Thousand Sons army that has, for example, Ahriman, the Exalted Sorcerer, a Sorcerer, 2 Rubric units, and 1 Scarab Terminator units, and I would assume you could have many, you can pack even more Psykers in a 2000 point army, but only with these guys. If there is no deny attempted, just taking 5 Smites and then adding the Doombolt, the Firestorm, the Baleful Devolution, and here I think I took the Gaze of Hate or a Dark Blessing for toughness 4 here. We are adding up to 17 mortal wounds expected damage output. So this is quite strong in a Psychic phase, provided of course that you can see the enemies, they are within 18 inches, etc. And this is before we are adding Kabbalistic rituals and other shenanigans. So this is just the baseline. If we look at denying the +1 to cast sorcerers, the blue lines was the damage output expected with a Thousand Sons having +1 to their cast. If we try to deny every time, we will get, let's say, the orange line on average. So basically, here I assume that we can deny every time, but this is already with these guys here. There are 11 spells, 11 psychic tests taken, and I don't know many armies that can deny 11 times, let's say. So most of the armies will be struggling to deny. Maybe they can strategically deny a couple of 1-2 spells where the cast value is quite low, but in the big whole, it's very difficult to deny and survive, let's say, the onslaught. So the 17 mortal wounds in my example, again, before considering any other shenanigans and cabal rituals, etc., in my theoretical example here, those would be reduced to 13.5 mortal wounds, which is still very considerable. And here I'm assuming I can attempt to deny 11 times, which probably will not happen or not be possible for most armies. And then a bit special attention on Magnus. So what is Magnus's expected damage output with +3 to cast? Remember also Magnus has a special smite ability that his normal smite instead of d3 is making a d6, and his d6 damage becomes 3d3 damage output, so very consistent and high damage output. And he has here I'm assuming he's in his top bracket. He gets +1 to cast in the Thousand Suns and +2 to cast from his ability. So basically he has a +3 to cast. So the Magnus Smite here is really strong. He can be doing 4.5 wounds, and he has a very high success rate and high damage for every smite that goes through. And it's difficult for anybody to, let's say, less than 15% chance to deny a spell from Magnus with a +3 if you don't have any strong deny modifiers, let's say. And if I take Magnus' Smite, the Baleful Devolution is really strong for Magnus with +3. He can reach the high Warp 8 level required, and with the +3, there is a big chance he will be rolling 12, 13, even very many high number of dice to do mortal wounds. Also the Tzeentch Firestorm and the Doombolt, all those are quite good for Magnus. He knows all of them, so he can select the appropriately. So just Magnus, he's able to do 10 mortal wounds on average without denying. Even with denying, he's close to nine mortal wounds in any case. So that was the, let's say, baseline. So looking at some selected buffs and combos for the Witchfires and the psychic powers here for the Thousand Suns. Of course, the Kabbalistic rituals are the army-specific. If all units are Thousand Suns, this is of course really tuned into improving the psychic powers. So there are several Kabbalistic rituals you can select and give them to a Psyker. Most of them you apply after you take the psychic test, so that's also strong that you can see that you just needed a 1 or 2 psychic power more, then you can add it or you can make it undeniable, etc. So for example, for 3 points, many of the spells require you many of the Witchfires require you to have a visible enemy. With this one, you can use a Psyker that cannot see, but it can see through another unit that can see them, let's say. The Malevolent Charge for only 4 Cabal points. This is really strong. Every time you make mortal wounds, or if you make mortal wounds with your psychic power, you add d3 mortal wounds with his psychic power. So this can make a Smite or let's say a Doombolt even stronger, adding even more mortal wounds to the table. You can give for 4 points. You can also give 6-inch more range to psychic power. For example, the 6-inch, for example the baleful assault, and you can also, for some of them that don't have very high range, you can add it for 4 points. For 5 points, you can give +1 to psychic test. For 7 points, you do not have to make the test roll. That the psychic test succeeds at the minimum warp. This can be if you really need to pass and there is no risk of denial from the opponent. This could be interesting, but it's quite expensive with 7 points. For 8 points, a psychic power cannot be denied. This can be really situational if you pass a very strong spell, but you pass it quite low and your opponent can deny, you could use these 8 points. For 8 points, you can also manifest a Witchfire that already has been used this turn, so you can use Doombolt twice or some of the other some of the other Baleful Devolution, for example, you could use it twice, and for 9 points you can add 2 to the Psychic test, bringing every Psyker up to, let's say, basically you would be having 3+ to your Psychic test, for example, for Ahriman or an Exalted Sorcerer. That could be quite strong. He will be reaching, let's say, Magnus levels of success rates. In the stratagems, there is the Malefic Scroll. The Smite deals 3 damage, not d3 or d6. Basically, it becomes a Doombolt here. The relics, there are several relics, some of them Athenian Scroll. You select a spell, and then you roll 3 dice when the Psyker with his relic attempts to manifest this spell, and you disregard the lowest, so even higher success rate for a selected spell, for example, Doombolt or something like that. The Warp Weave Mantle gives +1 to the test, Psychic test, if the model is wounded, and it also gives you that it's very difficult to make the charge rolls against this opponent. And then in the Legion command, for Exalted Sorcerer, for +25 points, a bit expensive, he can cast 1 more power, so he will be able to cast 3 powers. Or a Sorcerer, I think this is quite good for only, let's say, only 15 points for a Sorcerer. It allows you to reroll 1 dice when applying mortal wound damage, or rolling, for example, to get 6s to apply mortal wounds. It allows you to reroll 1 of those dice. So this can maximize, let's say, improve your smite damage with a sorcerer. So looking then at the receiving end, Death Guard. So what can we do? What can Death Guard do versus the Thousand Sons Witchfire Psychic powers? I think as the data show, denying the Thousand Sons is really difficult. In any case, you will probably be running out of deny chances. And the Thousand Sons, if there is a very important spell, they can still bypass us denying with the cabals. They have high pluses to their Psychic tests. It's really difficult to deny. Mortarion, of course, has 3 denies. Most of the others only have 1 deny, so yeah, it's difficult, as I calculated, just with a small Thousand Sun detachment, 11 spells, for example. Maybe we could be denying 3 or 4 of those, so most of them will just be coming through. So taking the damage and trying to minimize the damage and fighting on. Of course, the new Disgusting Resilience of Death Guard doesn't help us with mortal wounds. It's not a feel no pain anymore. It reduces the damage from weapons, so we are most of our troops are completely helpless or defenseless against mortal wounds. We don't have revives either for our Terminators or things like that, so it's really bad. Revolting Resilience Warlord trait with a 5+ feel no pain to protect 1 character a bit from mortal wounds. Again, with the mortal wound spam, the 5+ will still tear through the character. And of course, if we have Mortarion, he has the Revolting Resilience as one of his traits for the 5+ protection for mortal wounds. The Poxwalkers are probably a good squad here. 6+ feel no pain, and even every time for a mortal wound you would be losing, let's say, 5 points worth of a Poxwalker that you could revive. So Poxwalkers, if the opponent targets them instead of some other expensive elite choices, that's always good. We could add the Plague Surgeon to give 6+ feel no pain aura to Terminators and Plague Marines and other infantry. That could help, but again, with so many mortal wounds coming, we will be able to save a couple of wounds here and there. It won't change super much. Hiding important units could be interesting to avoid many of these spells demand that it's a visible enemy. And maybe if facing the Thousand Sons, maybe it's a better idea to not take Psykers and go for Abhor the Witch secondary. Could be a solution to go there instead of trying to face them full on the Psychic department, where they have all the strong cards at hand. So, reaching to the summary and final thoughts, Thousand Sons have a large variety of Witchfire spells. They are innately difficult to deny because they they start with at least +1 on the psychic test. They have cabal rituals that can improve that even further. The Doombolt is a good one. Multiple Smites will be used. The Tzeentch Firestorm benefiting and the Baleful Devolution, they benefit from as much plus to their casting as possible, can be doing some very high damage here. The typical 1000 Sounds detachment, just calculating, let's say 3 Psyker characters, a couple of Psyker units, that with a lot of Witchfire casting, they could be making 15-20 mortal wounds in the psychic phase. Magnus is expensive, but he's really strong in the psychic department, and his smite is very strong. He could deal around 10 mortal wounds in the psychic phase by himself using a couple of Witchfires here. The Cabal rituals, as I said, increase damage and consistency further, and it's probably difficult to do anything to counter as a death card, taking the punishment, trying to give back in melee. So if this Terminator survives Ahriman's smites and things like that, he could probably take some vengeance on the 1000 Suns. So this concludes the video. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments what you think about this analysis of if you're a 1000 Suns player. What are your favorite psychic spells? The Witchfires as a death card. Do you have any suggestion to how to counter this? As you saw, my analysis it looks gloom, let's say, on that department. And if you like this video, please press like and subscribe to my channel. I will be bringing you a lot more Warhammer tactics, reviewing different codexes, looking at also from the death card perspective. And if you want to support my efforts, please visit my Patreon page. I hope you appreciate all the work and effort needed to do this type of analysis and bring you all the data here. And with these words, GeneralJannis is signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.